Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the Pope's visit to Mexico, which comes at a crucial time for both the country and the church. We're in the company of Mexico's ambassador to France, Juan Manuel Gomez Robledo. Many thanks for being with us again. From Mexico City, John Ackerman, editor-in-chief of the Mexican Law Review. From Pristina in Kosovo, Edgardo Buscaglia, author of Money Laundering and Political Corruption, The Art of Organized Crime. And we're also in the company of Gaspar Estrada of the French Political Science Institute's Sciences Po America's Observatory. Before the break, John Ackerman was talking about the problem of the drug violence, and the Catholic Church has been, to some degree, is in a tricky position. There are the case of priests who've been assassinated, like a Ugandan priest by the name of John Seniondo, another priest who wears now a bulletproof vest, who's been a bit of a cause célèbre, if you will, inside of Mexico, and this one, who I believe he goes by the name of
Goyo.
That's right, Padre Gregorio Lopez. And he has said, if I do nothing for my sheep, I am not a pastor. If a dog bites your children and you do nothing, then you are worse than the dog. And this is a part of the problem. I'll put it to you first, Edgardo Buscaglia.
Can I finish the line?
Which is just on this point, which is it's a bit of a quandary for the Catholic Church itself. How far does it go itself in fighting organized crime? For instance, not taking the money of drug lords. And there seems to be a rift between the lower and the higher clergy on this.
Well, the international experience of many countries around the world, and we have been working in 109 countries suffering from organized crime within the states, shows that civil society is also infiltrated by organized crime through money, like you implied. And in Mexico, you do see dirty money going into the church, and you see complicity within the church with organized crime. This has been, for many years, even documented and brought to your screens through Hollywood movies. So this is not.
But of course, I'm sitting in an air-conditioned studio in Paris. It's easy for me to tell priests in southern Mexico or wherever not to take the money from local drug barons.
Look, in most countries around the world, the huge catalyst that started to clean up this sewage that you see in Mexico was brought up by a unified civil society, a huge civil society movement of the scale that you saw in South Africa with Mandela, or in the US during the civil rights movement, or in Colombia, or in Italy with Mani Pulite, Clean Hands. And Mexico has not started that process. And one civil society unified comes with an agenda of several points to start cleaning up, first of all, politics, because the most organized crime in Mexico is the political system. There's no doubt about that. I document that in my books with hard data. I understand that the ambassador is trying to do his job. He has to show a good, positive face to the world of Mexico. That's what he's been paid for. But I show in my books with hard data that the big organized crime problem in Mexico is politics. And from politics, it goes down to civil society. So until a civil society movement like with Italy, Colombia, South Africa starts cleaning up the system, the electoral system, where 8 to 9 out of $10 going into the electoral system comes from dirty money, from illicit funds. Until civil society moves with the church, pushing that movement behind, you will not see.
And has the church done enough?
No, not at all. You have good, wonderful representatives of the church, like Alejandro Solalinde, like the person that John mentioned a few minutes ago, but those are scattered examples. The leadership of the church in Mexico is highly corrupt. They have been very much hand in hand with political power over the years, and they have been part of the problem. They have been part of the sewage. They have not been part of. And the criticism of the Pope to the bishops has been exactly right to the point. The Pope has scolded the bishops. He has scolded the political elite, and that's where the main sewages are. So until you start seeing a real cleanup, and I will give you some examples, two-thirds of the Italian parliament was prosecuted for links to organized crime. 68% of the Colombian Congress was prosecuted for links with organized crime. Until you start seeing that kind of cleanup in Mexico, this nightmare will not go away. We will still be in hell.
Yeah,
John
there, Francois?
Yeah.
Just I think Edgardo has very beautifully put the cards right on the table, because precisely my point is that the issue is in government itself. It's in politics in Mexico. I was going to cite a couple of studies. For instance, Article 19, the International Free Press Group, every year comes out with a new statement on the situation of freedom of expression in Mexico, and it's very clear that between 60 and 70% of the attacks on the press come with either direct participation or clear complicity of the authorities. Just recently, there have been a series of new reports, for instance, on the situation of the 43 students from Ayotzinapa from 2014. We were
from Guerrero State
about that last year. Guerrero State. Well, apparently, the independent studies done by both a specialized group of Argentinian forensic investigators and the International Inter-American Commission on Human Rights have both concluded that the government investigation into the what happened to the 43 students was full of complete lies. For instance, the most important thing was what happened to the students. The government had said that the 43 students were burned on an open pyre in a city close to Iguala, and it turns out that this was materially and scientifically impossible. The Mexican population is now getting very used to the government lying to it and being the center part of this problem. I agree with Edgardo. The real solution in Mexico is from civil society. The problem there is I'm not as optimistic as Edgardo in terms of what the role the Pope is actually playing. He's saying lots of abstract philosophical things about indigenous rights, about forced disappearances, about death and corruption, but he's not pointing his finger. And as long as he doesn't point his finger, as long as Mexican civil society doesn't actually point its finger at politics and the government as the central problem with this issue, the Mexican authorities are going to be able to dance around these accusations and continue to pretend, as Ambassador Gomez-Robledo said, pretend that Mexico is a democracy. When in my recent book, I'm pretty much demonstrating and arguing that Mexico is not a democracy.
All right, a difference of opinion on that point.
Yes,
Ambassador Robledo.
Thank you, and I thank very much Professor Ackerman to point to the case of El Chapo, because by saying that El Chapo was recaptured just by chance, if I understood correctly, is simply not serious. There was a huge work between the various governmental agencies in cooperation with the United States as well, and in 6 months we were able to recapture El Chapo. But I also thank him for pointing out to the case of Ayotzinapa. And I would like to point out to the very conclusions of the group of independent experts who released their report in September. And in that report, 80% of the investigation done by the experts or so coincides with what the government has done. There is a big discrepancy on the fate of the students and whether or not they were burned in that place at that time.
And there was complicity between local authorities.
The very conclusions of the experts point to narco trafficking. Look at the very last chapter of that report, and you'll see that there is a clear, and there is a recommendation by the experts to look at that and to look at the connections and links between the local authorities in Guerrero and organized crime and narco trafficking. But as the dean of University Iberoamericana said recently in an interview, Father Fernandez Dávalos, who's a Jesuit, like the Pope, he said, the Pope is not in Mexico, will not come to Mexico to solve our problems, but he will give us the energy, the spiritual energy that we need to cope with those problems. And I would like to emphasize very much that. That's the role of the Pope. He's not a part of the civil society. That is not his role, but he plays a hugely important one.
All right, Gaspar Estrada, lots of points here. First of all, regarding El Chapo, because that's something we brought up a short while ago.
Yes.
We've seen with the recapture of El Chapo Guzman that now there's been a recalibration on the part of the government. In the past, it said it wouldn't extradite him to the United States. Now it's saying it's going to. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that the Mexican government is actually recognizing the failure of his penitentiary system because it's the second time that actually El Chapo Guzman attempted to escape from top prisons in Mexico. On the other side, I think that it also emphasizes the importance for Mexico of this bilateral relation between the Mexico and the United States in a way that this policy made basically co-produced between the Mexican and the American government in order to attack those cartels is not working as the top officials pretend, especially because it's been a long time that this policy existed since the Mérida strategy started in 2007, and until today we can't see effective results in terms of the delete of the drug industry. We have a fragmentation of the drug cartels. That's a fact. But that does mean that actually the drug industry have declined or curbed, and that's why I think that the announce that in April of this year you'll have a multilateral summit in the United Nations in order to discuss the hypothesis of the depenalization of some of the drugs is an important step, not only made by the government but also by the civil society. In Mexico, there is a debate actually today with especially former.
And for sure,
yes,
for sure, the drug trade is a debate unto itself. We could spend two hours on it. I want to bring it back to the church just for one second. The church a few years ago ran a video campaign called Brother Narco in one episode that was highlighted by our Mexico correspondent, Jan Grillo. A 13-year-old orphaned by a drug shooting hugs a sombrero-clad kingpin. She says, many say you're bad and you should be killed, but maybe they did the same thing to your parents or they never hugged you. And that brings up, I guess, a huge ethical question, which I'll put to you first, Ambassador. Do you do like in Italy, where mafia bosses were excommunicated? Or you were saying this is the year of forgiveness. Do you forgive? What do you do with these people?
Well, that is for the church to decide what to do in matters relating to sins and whether they are forgiven or not. This is not for the state to decide upon. For the state, we have to prevent and suppress criminals or crimes. And we are making a number of efforts. This year will mark the change of our criminal justice system.
It's not for the politicians inside. I want to ask. I want to ask Edgardo Buscagliaglia. Should they be excommunicated? These drug lords?
Oh, the church could be a wonderful catalyst for for a social movement of repression against organized crime. If the church were excommunicating all these leaders of organized crime or anyone participating in organized crime, including politicians and business people within the legal sector, In all the countries that you see organized crime operating, like in Mexico, and there are very few around the world, like Somalia and Pakistan and Mexico, you see that the social tissue is very much infiltrated by organized crime. Some of these organized crime leaders are heroes in circles, for example, El Dorado in Sinaloa, Mil Cumbres in Michoacan. You go there and society depends upon having the services provided by organized crime, sewages, irrigation system, churches built by these guys.
So you don't see the church in Mexico excommunicating these men?
Not yet, but it would be a wonderful move if they did. I mean, it would be a social catalyst for society acting against organized crime and not being part of organized crime like it is now. Much of society in Mexico has no other choice than to live with these criminals around them. When you have an absent state in much of Mexico, this is what happens in any of those countries. It happens in Somalia, it happens in Pakistan, it happens in Mexico. Civil society and society itself depends on organized crime for providing jobs. You go to Sinaloa and you take a taxi, and a good proportion of the taxis you take in Sinaloa belong to the Sinaloa cartel. So you do have, the church could be a much more powerful force against these groups if they excommunicated the leaders and many of the politicians involved. And going back to Ayotzinapa, you have hundreds of Ayotzinapas around Mexico. You have more than 27,000 forced disappearances in Mexico. Ayotzinapa is not an exception, it's the rule. So the church could do much, much, much more. It's not doing so.
John Ackerman, is there going to be a change? And I ask the question because we saw it this Monday with the Pope visiting the area where there are a lot of lapsed Catholics, a lot of people making the switch to evangelical churches. We can show you a 2014 Pew survey where Mexico, people not moving away from the church as much as in places like Brazil and Nicaragua, but nonetheless, it's something that's going to happen. Is the Pope going to have to be more forceful when it comes to issues like, for instance, excommunicating drug lords?
Well, there is a very powerful current of liberation theology in Mexico. Alejandro Solalinde is one example in Oaxaca. Bishop Raul Vera, who used to be the coadjutor of Samuel Ruiz, the great liberation theologist of Chiapas, is also a very important bishop in the northern part now of Mexico. We have a very important movement of liberation theologists and of people who are interested in putting the church at the service of justice, of organization, of the fight against corruption.
And is there a window of opportunity with this Pope?
There is, but this is what we're not seeing. I would really like to be as optimistic as Edgardo, but we're seeing a Pope who is speaking very in advanced, progressive speech, but I don't see him actually empowering on the ground
it's a very good point, John,
groups of people who are struggling to put the church at the service of these social movements.
Let me give you a footnote. Let me give you a footnote.
The church could do a lot more to, for instance, call for the release of political prisoners, for instance. That would be a great statement on the part of the Pope Francisco, or in favor of these 43 students. But he is not daring to do so. He is being very excessively institutional about his participation.
Okay, but look, this is just a footnote, if you allow me. This is a Pope, Francisco, that is the first Pope in history that has established anti-money laundering unit within the Vatican. The Vatican is concentrating between 2 and 3% of all the dirty money in the world going to the Vatican. This is documented in books, not just in mine. And this is the first Pope that established a criminal anti-money laundering unit and is actually jailing, prosecuting people in the Vatican. So I have been witnessing facts within the Vatican that I have not witnessed with previous popes. Now, of course, I would like to see more, John. I agree with you. But this is the first Pope in history that is acting against corruption within the church and actually prosecuting people within the church, cardinals, bishops, that are involved in corrupt acts. So I do have a sense of, I am optimistic, but based on facts, based on the fact that I've seen this Pope acting, and I have no doubt that he will be acting behind the scenes as a chief of state. We have to remember, he's not a civil society activist. This guy is a chief of state. So publicly speaking, this is as far as he can go. But I have seen this Pope acting and prosecuting people, and this is something that I don't see in Mexico.
I think that we are starting to agree, at least on that. Mexico's church is far from being homogeneous. It is a church that has very huge diversity. Professor Ackerman pointed to a number of examples, but I could give more. And of course, the church is to be obedient to Rome. That is a part of the discipline of the Catholic Church. But I would say that the Pope in this trip has sent very important messages. Only last Saturday, immediately after the official welcome at the National Palace, he went to the cathedral and he delivered a wonderful speech about corruption within the church, about transparency and corruption. And this is very important. But again, the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, and he is also head of state. He is not asked to behave like a member of the civil society. These are very different roles. So again, the visit is very important for a number of reasons, and because in the end, what it leaves is a message that can be powerful for transformation of minds, and of souls.
And of course, it's not just Mexico, it's the whole region that's watching this visit.
Of course, because there was also an encounter between the Pope and the head of the Orthodox Church in Cuba. And this is also a significant message in terms of the message of the Pope as a whole into the economic dialogue between religions. And I think that this Pope, he's actually doing really a new strategy, a new message towards Latin American people. I think that this visit also has clear political message in terms of the agenda. He decided to visit Chiapas, but he also decided to go to Ciudad Juarez, and that also, for me, an important message of the Pope in the way that he's actually translating with these events the priorities that he's giving in his message with the Mexican people. And I think that the fact that he's going to San Cristóbal de las Casas, for instance, and also Ciudad Juarez are important messages.
At opposite ends of the country. I want to thank you as well, Gaspar Estrada, for being with us, Edgardo Busquiliagla for being with us today from Pristina, John Ackerman in Mexico. I also want to thank Ambassador Robledo for joining us. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next.
Relationship.
And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. Just a quick look at some of how this has been playing out on social media. Of course, and social media very much image and catchphrase orientated. So certainly all of the images have been hit on the head, so to speak, the right images. So in any case, 20 minutes in front of Our Lady of Guadalupe, very much venerated in Mexico and across Latin America. And that was an image, I think, that was really spread across media and social media yesterday, and that made quite an impact. Of course, the sombrero, where would we be without that? Even before he touched down, there was that image of the Pope getting into the mood, I suppose, quite festive.
Ambassador Robledo, your reaction to that picture?
Well, this is very moving. This is very moving. This is, I mean, all popes that have visited Mexico call themselves Mexican popes. John Paul II did, Benedict XVI, and these popes call themselves as Mexican popes.
Right. So I think it certainly sends a strong message of friendship and indeed a certain informality as well that I think went down very well. What else do we have? Of course, kissing babies. So we've had the sombrero, we've had veneration in front of a very important saint, well, Our Lady rather of Guadalupe, and you have kissing the baby. And what else do we have? I'm just trying to be a little bit frivolous for a second here. We have the Pope Mobile, kissing of babies, and sombrero. So image-wise, striking the right chords.
We've seen several, and not just the Pope Mobile. We also saw the little Fiat there in the streets today.
Absolutely. So look, we have the cliches of the papal visit, but also some very strong symbols being sent out, as well as many of the media have been pointing out the fact that he's reached out to the indigenous populations en masse, especially for the indigenous population. Also speaking about crime, drug cartels, etc. Very strong language, religious language. With the devil, there is no dialogue. So a message really of zero compromise with this sort of dark side of Mexico indeed. And USA Today here focusing on the fact that he couldn't indeed walk around some of the districts he visited, if I could remember the name of it, Ecatepec, and which has indeed quite a high crime rate, or homicide rate in particular for women, and it was an attempt to draw attention to that. And just a quick look as well at how it's being covered in, if we can actually get the web page up, El Universal, one of the biggest newspapers in Mexico, and they're really drawing attention as well to his focus on the indigenous populations. There were quite a number of images on the website earlier which aren't coming up now, showing his attempt to draw attention to that. There you go. And there is a lot of discussion as well of another pope today. That's John Paul II. I don't think we'll have time to discuss that, but headlines all over the media about
his platonic relationship.
His platonic relationship, which was nonetheless intense, according to some media headlines, which I think is...
With a religious scholar.
That's right, a 34-year friendship, which there is absolutely no indication that it went beyond that, but a BBC show tonight putting the spotlight on that friendship through letters.
Many thanks, James Creedon.
Thanks, François.
I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.